Good afternoon, everyone. I'm really happy to be here to discuss Krupaji's book, Burns Boy. Um, Krupaji has had 3 different sessions at our festival. This is the third session she's attending. So really happy to be here to discuss her fiction, Burns Boy. Yeah. Um, Burns Boy starts with a 15-year-old boy who ends up in the Burns ward. His skin is peeling, there are blisters all over. It's a very gory situation, but the actual horror in Burns Boy is the everyday parenting that the protagonist endures. I really want to get into the story structure of it. It unfolds through the voices of the 15-year-old boy, his mother, and his sister. I wanted to ask you your decision for the structure of the novel, and then we'll get into the characters. Yeah.
Right. I'm a huge Ferrante fan and also a fan of Domenico Starnone, the Italian writer. And I was reading his novel Tais, which is La Lacchi in Italian, which has been translated from Italian to English by Jhumpa Lahiri, who now works a lot in the Italian language. Yeah. And while I had the idea for this story, I just didn't know how I was going to say this story. That's when I was reading Ties, and I was quite taken by the structure and the way that the story sort of unfolded in Ties, and I wanted to see, as they say, imitation is really the best form of flattery, and copying the great masters is something all great Italian artists have taught us to do. And I wanted to see how I can sort of use the structure that I was seeing in this other novel and try and see if I can fit it into this very Madras, very sort of 90s Chennai story and what I can do. And then we have our, the template for all of this, of course, is, Rashomon, which comes from originally a Japanese short story called Into the Bamboo Grove, which is basically the central incidence of the death of a man that is being probed, and you hear multiple versions of the reality from multiple characters, and I studied a little bit of film as well, and so I think on all of these various influences were there at the back of my mind. But mostly, I think I also wanted to sort of explore the craft of fiction a little bit more, and I felt like a character study of this kind will allow me to tell this story a little bit. It'll allow me to feel a little bit more confident that I am a fiction writer, because I do so many other things as well. But the thing I desperately crave recognition for is as an author of fiction, because in my head that is the hardest thing to do, and in my head that is the thing that makes me feel my smartest when that gets acknowledged for whatever reason. And so for all of these reasons, I chose to tell the story through 3 different points of view.
Speaking of the 3 different voices, I also have to mention Burns Boy has these 3 voices, but also the children at different ages, right? And there's the son, there's the mother, there is the sister. And you've done justice to all of the voices, the gender angle of it and also the age angle of it. And I wanted to know what kind of process goes into that, goes into understanding the voice of someone. How do you do justice to the voice of a character? It's the same event, I have to mention, it's the same event from 3 different people's perspectives. And through these perspectives, we get to know the characters of these people, but also their relationships. So I wanted to know what's the process that goes into figuring out the voice of each character.
I think that is really the confounding alchemical thing about writing fiction, because sometimes some voice just does come to the fore. You sit in front of a blank page and then you're trying to have a go at it. That is sort of what fiction really is. You're trying to dip into the subconscious. There's, of course, the mechanics of the story, the plot, what is happening to various characters and all of that. But for me, I feel like as soon as I've arrived at the voice, I know that I've cracked the book. And the voice is actually the hardest thing to do as well. So I think Guru, who's the central character of the book, the boy for whom this accident sort of is life-defining, I think that voice was basically the story that sort of had already come up. And I'd been writing women and writing about women for so long that it was quite surprising to me when my editor told me that she was happy with the boy and she was very convinced of the boy's voice, but it was the women's voice in the book that she said needed a little bit of work. And so I had to actually relearn how to write women for this book. And I had to sort of go into some uncomfortable spaces and also try and explore different ways of talking and writing and things like that. And the mother character was, of course, sort of easy for me to write, but the daughter character was, again, it's not something I speak like, it's not somebody that I am, and so that required the most invention, and I feel like that has actually come out pretty well. In my head, actually, I feel like that is the part that has come out well, and as writers, we are just constantly nitpicking our work, and so with the rest of it, I'm able to nitpick quite a bit, but with the daughter, I'm like, okay, I'm sort of convinced.
So I wanted to get into the mother's POV, but now that you mentioned the daughter, I wanted to explore the mother-daughter and mother-son relationship there, because it's not very distinctly or evidently pointed out, but there are undercurrents. You realize that there's a typical mother-son, typical in the sense that you see in a lot of mother-son relationships, and also the mother-daughter relationship. So can you talk a little bit about the nuances that you wanted to focus on for the mother-son and mother-daughter relationship?
Yeah, I mean, I think as a daughter, I kind of also have, my own opinions about how I've been mothered. And as a sister, I also have opinions about how how I've seen my male cousins and my sibling being brought up by, by no fault of theirs. I don't fault the boys for that at all, for the differences in which they were brought up. But I think just these sheer observations, it's not like a complaint as such for me, but as a storyteller, I think if you're in the same house and you're growing up in the same house and you see your brother is being brought up a different way and you're being brought up a different way, it is true. That is what happens. Whatever else we may want to think of, sons and daughters are brought up, or at least were brought up slightly differently in our generation. And so just those observations that had always been a part of my mind somewhere, I think.
Something that I felt was, so the book starts with Guru's POV, right? And Guru's judgment of his mother is very searing, very, very merciless in a way. But I feel like the mother is more forgiving of the son's judgment in a way, right? She's also concerned about what he thinks of her. To the daughter, she's a little more, she is a little more unforgiving in that way, which I found very interesting and also relatable.
I think there are some fruits of patriarchy for sons there in that sense. And also, on some level, removing whatever social commentary, at the end of the day, it is a story. And within this story, for this family, I felt like this was the dynamic that I wanted to play with. And, the American writer George Saunders, he runs a wonderful writing blog, if anybody's interested in following writing advice. It's called The Story Club with George Saunders. And he speaks about writing as a sort of invitation to play. and writing fiction especially. What else are we doing? We are inviting somebody else into our make-believe world. We are saying, you know, I have a toddler now, and when I have to put him to sleep, I have to come up with a story every night. And so on some level, you know, writing, I see writing as also that as a sort of a playful way to engage with the world around me. And I think in this book, I've done that the most, the sort of playful invitation. And even the observations, even though, you know, the people are harsh with each other, people are sort of, I think underlying it all, there is a little bit of a sense of humor in the sense that everybody is sort of like jokey, winky sort of making observations about each other. And I wanted that as well, because at the end of the day, they're family, they're going to come together. They may be thinking really bad things about each other, horrible things about each other, but when they're having a bad day, they're obviously going to have to call each other. And when they're in the hospital, one of them has to look out for the other. So this is the sort of dynamic that I was working with.
I want to get into the mother's character a little bit. And you had mentioned when we had talked that when you started writing the book, you hadn't become a mother yet. And over the course of writing the book, you had a child. So how has that influenced or informed your writing?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, my first novel was sort of absolutely sympathetical to the daughter, and you can see how much sympathy I have for mothers with this second book. And I mean, it's sort of, if anybody can do a complete sort of U-turn and become a fan of the opposite club, that's me. And I have, mothers have my utmost empathy and sympathy at this point. The kind of, you know, it starts at like a physical, visceral sort of a level where nothing you read, nothing you talk about prepares you for what comes at you. And people, for some reason, don't talk about it. And a bunch of us mothers were just sitting around a cup of coffee and talking about the kind of things that happen and to your mind and your body and the kind of stress you're going through. But beyond all of that, right? You asked me that, you said that Guru is able to, you know, be searing towards his mother, but the mother is forgiving of the son. And that is actually one of the central themes of the book, the fact that children need a lifetime of aids to get over how they've been parented, but parents are able to forgive their children for whatever, you know, follies of theirs much more easily. And why is that dynamic really like that? And also the mother in the book observes, and this is something that came from experience, of course, of the, you know, in the initial months of postpartum, the thing I would constantly tell myself whenever I felt like I was a bad mom was, he won't remember any of this. And this is something that I had to constantly tell myself, and there would be many days, and there still are many days when I feel like I'm failing as a mother, and I still tell myself, he won't remember all of this. But the mother in the book does observe this, the fact that you know, there is a poem at the end of the book, which if I can just sort of read, which is, even though I'm giving away in a sense the last page of the book, it has nothing to do with the story itself. It doesn't really matter. The story originally is titled Orutalai Kadal, which means one-sided love in Tamil, and the mother is a Tamil writer in the book. Tangame, you used to love me, you just don't remember. Your eyes lit up when I entered a room. Your smile was aimed at me even in a crowd of blurry faces. You cried, then melted into sleep in my arms, curled like a comma, and for months I slept with a comma on my lap. Whose fault is it that only I remember? Whose fault that something so precious lives only in my memory? I want you to know, now that I may leave, that we had each other, even if briefly. And briefly, it seemed to both of us like that was all we needed. So in a way, for me, this was written, you know, through those months of postpartum hormones coursing through my body. As you can see about how emo and senti it is, it's not something I might write now, and I might laugh at it, but I felt like I had to keep this, and this is, in a way, I think it sort of is what the book is really about. Yeah, I'll do another, like a small part of reading, which is about the first day the mother returns to work after she has given birth. 90 days after I had given birth to Aparna, I reported to work. My breasts wooden, stiff with milk. My body sore, still sensitive to every trifling disruption. My face glowing, projecting happiness that I felt nowhere in my bones. Reluctantly, I woke up early and had a long, long bath, but it did little to make me feel whole again. My poor mother, who had disapproved of my every move for years, including having this child, was already up. Just like when I was a little girl, she was back to cooking for me, first breakfast, then lunch, then plenty of coffee. I freely used her labor and gave her nothing but sullen, moody outbursts in return. I felt, as daughters do at some point, that she deserved my contempt for bringing me into this world, deserved to slave away for me, just as I knew that this girl that I had brought into being thoughtlessly, selfishly, would think worse things about me. One day, she would definitely wish me dead, call me a slut, surely tell me she hates me, and then when and if she had a child, she might find it in her stone-cold heart some sympathy. It certainly wouldn't be worth it, I thought then. By the time I got ready to work, Aparna was up and wailing, her pitch high like some classical singer in training. I tried to swing her up and down in my arms and then in the sari cradle in my room with nothing but the whirring fan for company in complete darkness. Then I tried to sing the only lullaby I'd ever known. Vave, vave, va, va, vo. No one in my family spoke Malayalam, but everyone sang this one lullaby in that sweet alien tongue. She would have none of it, though. I hadn't named Aparna then. I was thinking of calling her something fancy, modern, but my mother wanted her to be named after her mother. In the end, Sunil named her. She had a pronounced chin, just like me and my mother and my grandmother and my great-grandmother. I remember tracing her chin when she was born and wondering how many generations it went back, that chin. Did my hunter-gatherer ancestor mother have it too?
I have two more questions. Sorry. One, of course, we have to mention the father in the story, the absent father, basically. But I feel like the father gets the most sympathy and the most benevolence in the family, despite being absent. So can you talk a little bit about where that comes from?
It was a narrative choice to not have a voice for the father because he is an absent father in a sense. But I think it's not exactly sympathy that I think he gets from. It's the thing that allows men to get away, which the story sort of reflects. And men have gotten away with things like having two wives simultaneously in our society. And, things like maintaining two separate families. I mean, you can't even imagine any woman doing something like that. And historically, getting away with it. But men do. They have complete families that maybe don't even know each other exists, right? And how many stories like this we have heard growing up. And so I think that whatever is the perceived empathy or sympathy for the father is actually whatever I think is also a projection of what we come with for fathers as well. Fathers
actually, I also wanted to point out the mother helps to maintain that insulation for the father, right? She makes excuses for the father also.
And she loves him for some reason. Even I can't figure out. I made her up in my mind, but even I can't figure out. But I guess that is just how crazy love is.
So I'll just ask the last question, which is, I think like I mentioned, You have a memoir written just in this festival. You have a memoir, you have a translation, and you have this work of fiction. And in this book, the language is very, very noticeable because it is very much set in India, yet it's not the Indian English that we usually, it's not very effortfully Indian English, right? So I wanted to ask you about the language choice.
Right. When I was writing the memoir, for instance, I was trying to write, as Sanjay Subramanian, and I wanted to channel who he was as a person, how he speaks, and and it was actually a wonderful exercise because fiction is also trying to be a ventriloquist and trying to channel your voice through another person, and here in this novel, I think I was also very particular that the language sort of reflects our everyday, the way we speak as opposed to the way we are used to reading in books. And so with my fiction, I've often heard that it actually almost sounds like translated fiction, which I think of as like a great compliment, because that is what I'm doing. I'm thinking in multiple languages as well, and I'm constantly trying to express my thoughts using multiple languages. And so when I sit down to write, if it sounds like a translation, I feel like that is sort of a credit to what I'm hearing as well all the time. And I'm a huge admirer of translated fiction, in fact, and so I do try and bring that quality into my own English writing. There's a sort of a lack of formality or too much pretentiousness in a work of translated fiction, especially in Indian translated fiction, which I admire. So that is what I guess I was trying to channel.
Should we open it up to the audience? Okay. Yeah, you can ask questions if you have. Otherwise, I'll go for one more question.
Yeah, okay. I mean, I think it's hard to ask an audience question about a fictional book that they've never read. So I'm going to, but thank you for being here and listening. So I'm so grateful for all of you. Nothing makes me happier.
Thank you, Krupa. It has been really wonderful talking to you. And it was a really wonderful experience for me to read the book. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much.